Ever wondered what single event in 1914 triggered the outbreak of the Great War? Let's unravel the mystery. It all started on a sunny summer day in Sarajevo, with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. The man who pulled the trigger was Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist. This single act of violence, a bullet that echoed through the streets of Sarajevo, was the spark that ignited the powder keg of Europe. A complex web of alliances and rivalries, long simmering beneath the surface of the continent, was suddenly catapulted into the forefront. Nations began taking sides, treaties were invoked, and within a month, the world's major powers were at each other's throats. This is the moment where the world's history took a sharp turn, the moment when the 20th century truly began. And just like that, the world was plunged into a war unlike any it had ever seen before. Now, imagine a world divided, alliances formed, and battle lines drawn. This was the world in 1914. A complex web of treaties and alliances had split the globe into two major factions, the Triple Entente and the Central Powers. On one side we had the Triple Entente, a powerful alliance between France, Russia, and the United Kingdom. France, bitter from its loss in the Franco-Prussian War, yearned for revenge and the return of its lost territories. Russia, the vast empire of the East, saw itself as the protector of Slavic people and had its own ambitions in the Balkans. The United Kingdom, the empire where the sun never set, was drawn into the conflict due to its entangled alliances and its concern over Germany's rising naval power. Opposing them were the Central Powers, primarily composed of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. Germany, a rapidly industrializing nation with ambitions of becoming a global power, had formed a dual alliance with Austria-Hungary for mutual protection. The Ottoman Empire, often referred to as the sick man of Europe, saw the war as an opportunity to regain its lost territories and prestige. These alliances weren't just about mutual protection. They were about ambitions, rivalries, and a dangerous belief that a war could be quick and decisive. Each country had its own reasons for entering the war, be it national pride, territorial ambitions, or the desire to shift the balance of power. But as these alliances solidified, so did the battle lines. Countries began mobilizing their armies, readying their weapons, and preparing their populations for the possibility of war. What started as a localized conflict in the Balkans was rapidly escalating into a global confrontation. With sides chosen, the stage was set for a brutal conflict that would span years and continents. The world held its breath, waiting for the spark that would ignite the powder keg and plunge humanity into the deadliest war it had ever seen. The Great War ushered in a new era of warfare, with technology playing a pivotal role. Let's discover how. In the early 20th century, the world watched in awe and horror as war was redefined by technological advancements. The battlefield became a testing ground for new machines and methods of destruction, transforming warfare into something unrecognizable. One such innovation was the tank. A response to the stagnant trench warfare, these iron beasts trudged through the mud and over the trenches, brushing aside barbed wire like it was mere shrubbery. Their heavy armor rendered them impervious to standard gunfire, and their mounted weapons brought devastation to the enemy lines. Tanks, in essence, brought movement back to a static war, changing the face of ground combat forever. Then, there were the airplanes. Initially used for reconnaissance, these flying machines quickly evolved into weapons of war. The skies became a new battlefield, with pilots dueling in the clouds while dropping bombs on the unsuspecting below. The romantic image of the valiant pilot was born, but so too was the terror of aerial bombardment, a fear that would persist and amplify in the wars to follow. Perhaps the most chilling advancement was the introduction of chemical weapons. Gases such as chlorine and mustard gas were unleashed upon the trenches, invisible killers that choked, blinded, and burned. The use of these weapons marked a dark chapter in the history of warfare, leading to international laws banning their use. Yet, their legacy lived on, a grim reminder of the lengths humanity would go to in the pursuit of victory. Indeed, World War I was a war of firsts. It was the first time tanks rolled across the battlefield, the first time airplanes dominated the skies, and the first time chemical weapons were employed with such devastating effect. These technological advancements not only changed the nature of warfare but also set a grim precedent for the conflicts to come. Indeed, World War I was a war of firsts, setting a grim precedent for the conflicts to come. But what was life really like for the soldiers on the front lines? Let's delve into the harsh reality of trench warfare. Imagine living in a subterranean world where mud and water are your constant companions. This was the reality of the trenches, a labyrinth of narrow, dugout corridors that stretched across the battlegrounds. Soldiers lived, ate, slept, and fought in these trenches, constantly under the threat of enemy fire. The conditions were far from ideal. Rats and lice were rampant, adding to the discomfort and disease. The weather was another formidable foe. In the winter, soldiers faced the biting cold, often leading to frostbite. In the summer, the heat turned the trenches into a breeding ground for disease. Trench foot, a painful condition caused by prolonged exposure to damp and cold, was a common affliction. And let's not forget the ever-present smell of rotting bodies, cordite, and the stench of unwashed men, a sensory assault that was a constant reminder of the grim reality of war. Then there was the psychological toll. The concept of no man's land, a desolate expanse of territory between opposing trenches, was a chilling embodiment of the deadlock and stalemate of the war. To cross it was almost certain death, yet soldiers were often ordered to do so in futile attempts to gain ground. The constant threat of death, the lack of sleep, and the deafening noise of artillery fire led to a condition known as shell shock, now recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder. It was a silent epidemic, a war wound that wasn't visible to the naked eye, but left deep scars on the minds of the soldiers. The trenches were a testament to human resilience in the face of unimaginable adversity. They gave shelter, but at a cost. They were a grim and inescapable reality of the Great War, a symbol of the dehumanizing effects of modern warfare. The horrors of the trenches brought a new understanding of the true cost of war. As the war ended, the world needed to rebuild and make sense of what had transpired. Enter the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles, signed on June 28, 1919, was a cornerstone of World War I's aftermath. It was a peace document, signed by Germany and the Allied powers, designed to bring closure to the Great War's tumultuous events. The treaty had numerous terms, but let's focus on the most significant ones. Firstly, Germany had to accept full responsibility for the war, a clause known as war guilt. This stipulation was more than symbolic. It paved the way for reparations, which Germany was obligated to pay to the Allied countries. These reparations were vast, amounting to billions of dollars in today's money, crippling Germany's economy for years to come. Secondly, the treaty imposed severe territorial losses on Germany. Key territories such as Alsace-Lorraine were returned to France, while other regions were carved out into new nations. This led to a significant reduction in Germany's land and resources. Lastly, Germany's military was drastically reduced. The treaty limited Germany's army to 100,000 men, with no air force and a tiny navy. This was intended to prevent Germany from ever threatening peace again. The countries involved in drafting the treaty were primarily the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Italy, known as the Big Four. However, the treaty was largely dictated by the victors, particularly France and the UK, with Germany having little say in the proceedings. The Treaty of Versailles had a profound impact on the world. For Germany, it led to economic hardship, political instability, and a sense of national humiliation, fueling resentment that would later contribute to World War II. For the rest of the world, it redrew borders and reshaped the global political landscape. The Treaty of Versailles marked the end of the war, but was it truly the end of conflict? The answer, as history would show us, is a resounding no. The treaty's harsh terms and the discontent it bred laid the groundwork for another, even more devastating global conflict. So, we've seen the causes, the battles, the technology, and the end of the Great War. But what happened next? Well, brace yourselves for a journey into the aftermath of World War I. We'll be stepping into a world trying to put itself back together, a world forever changed by the horrors of the Great War. We'll explore how the Treaty of Versailles set the stage for a new international landscape, one that saw the rise of totalitarian regimes in places scarred by the war. We'll take a look at how these regimes capitalized on the post-war disillusionment and dissatisfaction, using it as a springboard to seize power. We'll delve into the lead-up to another catastrophic conflict, World War II, and examine how the seeds of this war were sown in the ashes of the first. Intrigued by the aftermath of World War I? Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll dive deeper into the post-war landscape and its lasting impact on the world. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss out on our upcoming historical adventures.